happy hump day.
Happy Wednesday, Tracy. How are we doing today?
Awesome. Yeah, you make me laugh. I was just thinking what we've done since we last recorded an episode, and I'm thinking, did we ever talk about rupee kaur?
We did not. Well, that's what I was going to mention too.
Oh,
yeah, a highlight of our week, I think, was rupee kaur.
Oh my God. As usual, I'm very much an adventurer. I don't necessarily pay much attention to the adventure I may be going on.
Which is a good thing, because sometimes it's a really good thing to do, is to accept an invitation where you don't necessarily know what you're going into. And so you just go into it blind, but you also go in with a completely open mind.
Yes. And actually, I do that often. However, I do that with people I trust. So when people I trust invite me to something, I go with an open mind and I don't necessarily know what I'm doing. And that was a good example. When you invited me to this show, I was thinking, I just made an assumption. It's a comedian. I don't know if it was because we've been talking about comedians. I just assumed it's a comedian I haven't heard of. So I was like, sure. Turn up. And then I'm like, and then you're telling me, have you heard of her? No. Have you looked her up? No. She's a poet. Oh. I'm thinking, what's this going to be?
When I said, she's a poet, did you think of like your school assembly, poetry recitals, that kind of thing?
I was just okay. Or like, but then I was like, in the Sydney Opera House, that was kind of surprising because, the Sydney Opera House has got, the best shows, the best talent, very entertaining pieces. So I was a bit like trying to reconcile in my head. Poetry, Sydney Opera House. Okay.
Yeah, so it doesn't, but you're right, because the two don't really go hand in hand, like at first thought. So,
no. And then I was thinking of something I may have seen on television, which I have seen on television, slam poetry. I was thinking, maybe it's a little bit like that. And I've never been to one. So I was like, okay. And then when we went in there, it was really full. I'd say, what would you say, 80% female in the room?
There was a lot of females there for sure. Yeah, but actually that was quite good, because that was one thing that I was doing, was that whilst you were probably having these thoughts, Tracy, I was actually trying to read the room. So I was basically looking around to see what kind of audience does rupee kaur kind of attract. And it reminded me of my library book kind of group. So, and it kind of made sense. So it was very much a literary audience. So,
but how would you know, other than the fact that it was a literary
I suppose it's kind of, it's like, I suppose it's that generalization that you make. Like when you go into a library, you don't necessarily see like a lot of people with like casual wear, like sports gear on. You don't really see, there's a certain kind of, I'm not saying that, everyone wears corduroy pants and wears glasses. I'm not saying that, but it's like, there's a certain, people that visit the library a lot. So that's for sure.
Well, actually, what I noticed is people really made an effort dressing up, like they were going to the opera, dressing up really lovely. So everybody looked amazing, stunning. I didn't really dress up that much.
No, you look great, but it's interesting what you say. It's about the age group too. So the age group, I don't remember seeing a lot of the young people there, like in their late teens, like in their 20s. It was probably around about like 30s, 40s. It was a much more kind of slightly older age range. So, which is great. Mature-ish.
Yeah, I'd say 30s, 40s. Yeah, 30s, 40s. Yeah. And to the literary point, people were there with the book. There's people that brought the book. So, and anyway, I went in blind, no idea what to expect. Sitting there thinking, okay, but it was buzzing, and it was in the main room, room of the opera house, the concert hall. So that's a big deal. And then what I sat through for the next 2 hours blew my mind, and it was inspiring. And I was just like so impressed with her bravery, sassiness, and creativity for the written word.
I think you've described rupee kaur in a nutshell there, being brave, and definitely there's so much sass on that stage. And the fact that she held that stage in the Sydney Opera House's like concert hall for 2 hours without a break was just so impressive. So impressive. So
and it was more than poetry, but it's that kind of poetry. I mean, I've read some poetry. It doesn't move me at all. I don't even feel a quiver, when I read some types of poetry, and it might just be that's not for me. But her poetry really speaks to me. And I'm not just me, I'm assuming lots of people, for her to be so popular, it just speaks to her real pain, real struggles that everybody can relate to in such a creative way. And I really love, her calls to action, or her expression of feminism and what it means to be a woman and what it means to be heard and what it means for all these things. And I just really that's why I really loved it. So
yeah, and I think that's the other reason why I actually invited you on to the show, was because I thought this is something that I think you'd really resonate with. So, and I'm glad it did. So yeah.
Yes.
Really,
well, yeah, I went crazy, didn't I?
Yeah, but
I've got to buy a book. Got a book.
It was great, but yeah, because I'd read a few of her pieces before. What's always struck me about her work is that stroke of feminine. Her content is all based around that femininity and celebrating what it's like to be a woman and go through the struggles of being a woman. And she expresses herself just so well, and she captures what you're thinking but can't put into your own words. So
that was creatively. And what I like is how she highlighted a lot of cultural norms that we might not even think, or might not consider how harmful they are or disempowering they are. Like, I probably can't say it because it's probably too. The P word,
right?
The female genitalia, which is usually described in a crass way, using the P word, let's say.
Yeah.
I had never considered, even though it makes perfect sense, that word is often used as an attack, as a sign, as an abusive term that means weak, that means inadequate, that has all those meanings stacked behind it. And that's how it's used generally by men and women, without actually thinking about, well, what's that word represent? And what does that mean? Do you know what I mean?
That's it. Yeah. Again, is another example of that unconscious bias. But
I probably use that word myself in jest, but the intent behind the word is to say you're a wimp,
it's that connotation attached to the word.
You're lacking in some way. And it's just, anyway, I love her. I'm a new fan. Thank you.
It's great. I mean, I love the fact that she's from an Indian background and she's not afraid to basically talk about sexuality, talk about her femininity, because it's not encouraged, especially in the Indian community. And so it's really great to see somebody of an Indian background just tackle that.
Well, this is what I mean. People smashing through cultural norms that empower people. And that's what she's doing. So I just think she's amazing.
Yeah, it was a great night.
It was a great night. Thanks for that.
Yeah.
All right. What stories do you have?
Yeah, so which stories have we got on for today? So shall I start off?
Go for it.
I did actually see an article the other week, and it's in news.com.au, and it was all about a term called Theybies. And the article was explaining how it's all about a program that was going to be aired in a few days here in Sydney, and it was part of a documentary show, and it was about how it's a trend that's taking on in Australia in the last few years, where parents are now no longer assigning a gender to their newborn babies. And so the article that I've got here from news.com.au, the headline is Theybies. Parents speak out about letting young children choose their own gender. So I'll read through the article. It says, a preview of this Sunday's episode of an unprecedented parenting trend has clocked up millions of views. An explosive teaser of this show has clocked up more than 4 million views on social media. The previewed segment will shed light on an unprecedented parenting trend that lets young children choose their own gender. Known as Theybies, a portmanteau of the pronoun they and the word baby, and a concept that's gained traction since about 2018. The children are brought up without gender designation from birth and are referred to by their parents using they, them, or their pronouns. One parent who is raising their child without gender said, "We didn't assign a gender at birth. We're not trying to eliminate gender. We're just really helping kids find their own path to it. I'm letting this little person be who they want to be," another parent featured in the preview said. Strangers in the street have had quite a strong response. "Why are you so obsessed? Why do you need to know?" While parents are increasingly raising their kids outside of traditional gender norms, for example, sharing clothes and toys, what sets gender open parenting apart is that they do not reveal the sex of their child to anyone, in the hopes the latter won't be pigeonholed into gender stereotypes. Even the child, while aware of their own body parts and how they may differ from others, is not taught to associate those body parts with being a boy or a girl. Once your child meets the outer world, which may be daycare or preschool or grandparents, it's pretty much impossible to maintain a gender-free state, Chicago Medical School professor of neuroscience Lise Elliott told the outlet. And she went on to say, and depending on how conventional your community is, you could be setting your child up for bullying or exclusion. It's important, developmental psychologist and author Christina Spears Brown told NBC, for parents of Theybies to prepare their children for a society that's really obsessed with a gender binary. And people are going to want to put that child into one of those binary categories. And so for children not to be confused, parents have to give kids the language and the understanding of recognizing that I'm not taking part in this binary.
Wow, that I did not heard of that.
Yeah, a term called Theybies, which is taking off in Australia.
I'm guessing it came from America, though.
It doesn't say about the origin, but yeah, you'd probably assume, I suppose it's taking gender identity to the next level. I mean, this is from birth. So that means whenever, obviously, there's no gender reveal. Obviously, there's none of that, but they're actually taking it one step further, whereby there is no gender. So if someone says, "Oh, what did you have? Congratulations on your new baby. Is it a boy or a girl?" That's what lots of people normally want to know, right? But that they're taking that element out of the equation. So,
I would just say a healthy baby. I don't know if it's a boy or a girl yet. It was up to them to decide if I was going to.
That's exactly what the parents are saying, and that's what, and they're coming up against a lot of backlash around it and confusion, because obviously it's like, I mean, if there was someone in my group and I asked, "Oh, that's great, oh great, and I heard about a baby being born. Oh, that's great, congratulations, oh, what was it, boy?" I would naturally ask, "Is it a boy or a girl?" And if I was told, "Oh, we don't know yet because we're going to wait for them to decide," I'm not sure how I'd respond to that.
Well, how would you?
Because I haven't come across babies before. And so
you haven't come across babies.
Theybies.
Oh, Theybies.
Yeah, I haven't come across a Theyby before. Now that I read this article, now that I've seen the feature on the documentary last week, now I'm going to be a little bit more prepared, so that if I do hear about a Theyby parent, then I'm able to then, articulate that in my mind and then respect the fact that, I didn't know that. I probably wasn't aware that my friend and their partner were choosing to be as Theyby parents. And it's a respectful forum. So now that I know, I wouldn't have known before. And I think there's lots of people out there who would have been in my position where if they would have asked, they probably wouldn't know how to respond because they may not have come across the term Theyby before.
Well, that's the thing, why do we have to know? We might not know. Why isn't it okay to make a mistake and be corrected? You're not expected to know everything about everyone. It may be, I've never even heard of Theybies. And you might, if that's so popular and it grows in popularity, you might come across that someday. I get it. It's uncomfortable to change a way you're used to behaving. It's uncomfortable for everybody to change a pattern of behavior that you're used to doing over and over and over. I'd do exactly the same. I'd be like, "Oh, well, you're having a boy or a girl. Do you want a boy or a girl?" If it's not born yet. Because I know people sometimes have preferences.
Yeah, I think with this article, it was highlighting, part of this article was also highlighting about of a response that the Theyby parents had. The Theyby parents are quite on a defensive about why is it such a big deal for everyone. What's the point of even asking? So in this particular article, for the Theyby parents that they were interviewing for as part of this article, it came across as quite defensive.
Oh, that's a shame.
Yeah, rather than coming from a perspective of this is something quite different that we're using. It's a different approach to parenting, and that we've decided to go down the path of. And we understand a lot of people may not understand it, but we're going to be helping them to understand this. It wasn't necessarily like that in the article. It was more so about why is it so important? Why does everyone need to know what a gender is?
Yeah, I get it. The fact is, they're changing cultural norm, and that's always going to be. And it's not even just a cultural norm.
I think this is one step further than a cultural norm. This is
isn't the changing a cultural norm. The cultural norm is we have a binary sex. That's the cultural norm in every country in the world, right? Yeah. So they're small group of people, a minority, are changing that. And it's uncomfortable to change anything that is normal. It's uncomfortable for people because it's different. So I get it. It seems like this big crazy thing because it's so different. It's not really surprising. I'm not surprised this is happening, given how far we've come with, recognizing non-binary, people choosing to be non-binary, people choosing to be transgender. I'm kind of not surprised to hear this story. Just never heard it. I'm just trying to think how I'd react. I think they just need to be patient. They can't be defensive because people don't know what they don't know. How are they? It's a shock for people to change a habit of a lifetime.
Yeah, I think the article is more so around about not necessarily their reaction. I think the article, and this is also what I would be interested in, is what's the logic behind the Theyby parents choosing to want to go down this path. That's what this article is introducing. And the reason why I've chosen this article to share on this podcast is because it raises questions for me too. I'd be interested in finding out more about, what would lead parents to go down this path. It's very different to when you have a child and at a certain age, that child starts expressing, issues around their identity. And compared to parents choosing to not assign any gender to their child from the get-go. I'd be interested in finding out what the reasoning behind.
So if you had to guess, what reason do you think?
I don't know. It's like, for me, it's like a very open, this is kind of a fairly new area for me. I don't know too much about this area.
All right, but if you had to guess, could you guess?
I think for me, where my mindset goes is around about, okay, well, what do you perceive as a boy as a parent, and what do you perceive as a girl as a parent? I know that there's parents who really, really go heavy in terms of that generalizing gender, i.e., painting their rooms blue or dressing them in pink, and that's what parents do. The parents are then basically setting up an identity for the child, whereas I know lots of other parents who are very neutral. I know lots of parents who don't choose any colors. They still call their child a boy or a girl, but they don't choose to. That's they stop. And they don't choose to do anything. It's like, I actually know a parent who's raised their child whereby they've gone in truck, they go towards a truck. It doesn't matter, but they're still labeled a boy or a girl. And so for me, that's neutral. But the reason why I'm saying it's taking it a step further is because the parents are now taking away the actual, okay, you're not a boy, you're not a girl. And so, and at what point does the child then choose? Do they choose, and how? And what contributes to their selection criteria? There's so many factors in this. There's so many factors.
Okay. I think it would not be very easy for a child to navigate that in the society we live in currently, which is very binary. Because even if the parents treated them like they, them, people outside of the home probably wouldn't. And they've got very little control over that. Like in the playground, at the school, the teachers, if they look like a girl or they look like a boy, I sometimes some people are some males have very feminine features and some females have very masculine features. And depending on our style of hair, whatever, it may not be easy to tell somebody's gender anyway. But sometimes you will make assumptions about somebody's gender by how they look. So it's going to be hard for them not to be labeled as a gender.
Yeah, and like, for example, in the formative years, like when you're at nursery, and again, nursery for many years. So I don't know what the system is like, but in terms of like lavatories, in terms of toilets, I don't know if toilets are still labeled girls and boys at nursery school. I don't know, but maybe they are. And so it's about, I suppose, would there be a certain level of confusion that the child would be undergoing around that environment, and also what kind of level of confusion would there be, not only for them to integrate with other children, but also the confusion on the other children's part in terms of integrating with them. So there's so many layers that I think still need to be looked at. It almost feels like this Theybies parenting style almost sounds like it's very much like an experiment. It's kind of like, it's so new. It's such a new way of looking at things, not looking at things. It's such a new approach to parenting. And I don't know whether or not the parents have considered the external environment and how far the external environment has made, what differences has been made over the years to accommodate this style of parenting, and whether or not that style of parenting is ready for this external world.
Maybe, but then maybe you just have to take a risk sometimes. You might be right. It might be terrible. It might be a big fat mistake. But
and this is why I'm coming back to that word experiment. It feels very experimental.
Well, it is if it's not been done before.
But is that, how fair is that on the child?
Yeah, I see.
There's so many. That's what I'm saying. This parenting approach, it raises a lot of questions because there are so many layers, so many factors to be mindful of and to consider. So yeah, I think it's definitely worth.
Honestly, I don't necessarily think it's unfair to the child, because as soon as the child gets awareness that there's some difference going on, because they'll pick it up pretty quickly about how they're being treated by people outside of their home. Children pick these things up really quickly. I imagine this could happen. The child will flip-flop between boy, girl, boy, girl, boy, girl as it's growing up.
And that's and I think that's, so I watched the feature, and that's exactly what's happened, Tracy.
Yeah.
So the child has been flip-flopping between, and I think again, I'm going to add in, this is a layer that I'm talking about. I think I'm not a parent, so I'm going to say this with caution. A purpose of a parent is, one of the purposes of a parent is to help navigate your child through its emotional, physical development. And it's almost like at birth, the parents are relinquishing that responsibility. And so they're not necessarily helping the child navigate through what is being a girl or being a boy. It's like, choose which side and whatever you feel comfortable with. And so where it kind of brings into question, what I'm saying is, I'm raising this because it does bring it into question. Where does the parent's role come into play about being the person for that child to help them navigate through their physical, emotional, cognitive, formative years? That's the parents, that's one of the parents' main roles, is to help a child through its cognitive abilities in its formative years. And for a parent to then to basically step aside and say, in terms of identity, you can choose that. Not from age 5 or from 9 or from 16 or so forth, but from the time you're born. It does question, okay, what responsibility is a parent playing then?
I don't know if I agree. I mean, when you're a baby, how concerned really are you if you're a boy or a girl? I personally think kids are more concerned with getting fed, if they're hurt, playing with toys, having friends or people to look after them. I don't think they're sitting there mindful of what it means to be a boy or what it means to be a girl necessarily. I don't know if that's such a primary concern at that young age, but if they're being treated in a negative way because of that decision, then that's going to bring gender higher up the, thinking of priority for them.
But,
And
in a sense, it's kind of is it that's why this article is saying that, you know, it also raises that question, is again, it's another layer, is that is this style of parenting putting the child up for bullying, for a harder life, in essence, for more of a challenge, whereby, you know, because the rest of society, you know, it may not necessarily be on board with this. And we're not in a society at the moment where we have binary gender. We still have male and we still have female. And I can't see that.
Yeah, but they're not taking that away. They're not saying you have to be non-binary.
Yeah, of course. But the thing is that a challenge to be placed on a child, you know, from birth? You know, it's kind of like that's what the question is.
Well, I guess from their perspective, this is just me guessing, because I'm also guessing what the thinking behind it might be, is that if you assign a gender, then you straight away are basically educating that child, influencing that child, imprinting on that child how it should and shouldn't be, how it should behave, how it should dress, not just the parents, but outside world, because you've assigned it this gender. And so you're taking away that limitation. I think that's how they may see it. But removing that limitation.
But in essence, they're questioning their own abilities or potential of what kind of parent they may be.
I'm not saying,
and again, it's that style of imprinting. So when you're talking, Tracy, about imprinting, it's down to the parents.
But it's not
what they imprint.
Yeah, you're right. It's not just down to the parents. So what I'm thinking, and I'm not saying one's right, one's wrong. I'm just trying to see what the logic could be. Yeah, what it could be, because we're not understanding. So not just that they imprint. Yeah, you're right. It depends how they treat that child, but also what that child believes themselves. So if you're neutral, if that child believes, if you told the child that it's a boy, right? And even if you're neutral, they're going to be going out in the world going, right, I'm a boy. What does that mean? What does that mean? What does that mean? Right, this is a boy, that's a boy. This means this means this. So they're making judgments about how they should behave by what they see in the world, not just on how their parents treat them. Yes, how their parents treat them is a big part of it. But they're making judgments about themselves. They're making judgments about who they are, what their identity is, by what they see. Now, they've been told they're a boy. So that means when I go out, that's a boy. That's a boy. That's what I need to relate to. That's my identity. So I can understand they want to take away that limitation. And I think that may be what the logic is. I'm not saying it's right. I'm not saying it's the best approach. I'm not saying it couldn't cause problems. I'm just trying to figure out what maybe their logic is behind making that kind of decision.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to hear what their logic is around what their responsibility is in terms of what style of parenting they would have if they did label their child girl or boy. That would be really interesting, because
it would take a lot of support.
Because you can have a child, I see it all the time. You can have a child and call it a girl and call it a boy. And you don't necessarily, you know, and if there's struggles around a girl identifying or seeing other girls who aren't very strong, then I've actually seen it whereby it's the parent who then steps in and raises the child to be strong, to be, you know, because that's the parent's responsibility as a child, to see what is their child looking at. What is their child? What kind of images are their child sinking in? And then it's up to that child. It's up to the parent to then steer that.
So do you think the parent wouldn't be growing?
That's one thing about a parent's responsibility, is steering a child, is steering them. Parents don't necessarily, I don't know many children who I did this because I've done exactly what my parents have told me, and that's the person I am today. You know, people don't do exactly what their parents say. Instead, what they do, they're influenced. There's parental influence, and that's what it is. It's the parental influence, and that's why it'd be interesting to hear from these baby parents about what influence do they still have on their child. So, what are they afraid of? You know, are they not strong in their abilities to help steer that child, even if they were labelled a boy or a girl? That would be interesting to hear. I don't know.
But do you think it takes away other attributes, some sort of useful attributes to not? Like, what do you think?
I don't know at the moment. I don't know at the moment with this baby parenting approach. I mean, to be honest with you, I don't think too much about parenting approach because I'm not a parent myself. So, but what I do find interesting is, there are reasons behind why people do things. And this Theyby a parenting approach, for me, I'm questioning around when it comes to parenting, and parenting main responsibility is about steering whatever, whether it's a boy, a girl, even if they have a bloody dinosaur, as a child. How do you steer that dinosaur into feeling a certain way, into identifying, okay, yes, I am a dinosaur and I'm going to be proud of it, that kind of thing. And so even if someone says, okay, yeah, yes, you're a boy, great, okay, well, we'll be proud of a boy. Oh, I'm a boy, but I don't feel like a boy, I think I'm a girl. Well, then we'll navigate and help that person around that. And I think taking away all of that and saying from the get-go, I'm going to wash my hands of that. I'd be interesting. This is what I want to know. What's the motivation behind relinquishing up that responsibility? That's what I'd be interested.
I don't know if I think they have relinquished the responsibility, but I can see how that could be perceived that way.
Which is why I'm saying there's so many different layers to this story.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting news to me for sure.
Yeah. But at least we know. At least now we know what a Theyby is.
At least now we know what a Theyby is. Yeah.
Yeah.
And but actually, when I read the title, what I actually did want to point out, because this is there is other difficulties with that. Well, I guess you kind of have to have somewhere noted gender at birth, because your gender has scientific implications, like what's normal and abnormal in your laboratory results. Like there's different ranges for males and females. That's just to be able to diagnose you with disease. So that's an example of where you
can you imagine? Let's say this parenting approach evolves and becomes popular, and then it changes the face of the way the world's identity is, right? So let's say this goes off. So what would that look like? What would that look like? So and I'm not just talking about, oh no, there's not going to be any gender reveal parties, right? No, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the bigger picture in terms of, okay, what would society look like then? What would it look like? Be interesting.
Yeah, I don't know. Couldn't answer that question. It's too.
And this is why this article is coming up, is because it's becoming a trend. So this article wasn't just about one particular family or one particular set of parents. So this is actually now becoming a trend.
Yeah.
So that's why I'm asking.
I don't know, because we don't know the answer, and I couldn't even guess. All I can give is my opinion. I don't particularly think it's harming the child if they get the right support, because it's very different approach to parenting and different from the norm and how society is everywhere. I'm curious to see how it works out. I think we should do another documentary in, I don't know, 3 years, 4 years. Like those kids that were followed.
Yeah, like they did 7-Up.
Yeah.
So yeah, and I think they went on to I think when they went on to age 49 or something. So I think it was back in the 1960s, there was a show called 7-Up. So they had a group of children who were 7 years old, and then they revisited them every 7 years when they were 14, 21, 28. And and they did like a documentary about it, and they went on until they were about 49 years. It's amazing.
Yeah, I think they should be following these kids.
That was like reality TV in the 60s.
I think it's obviously very controversial, and I think it's definitely worth following up the story to see how does the world treat them? What's it like for the kids when they can articulate, their experiences? Like, I don't know.
Yeah,
it'd be interesting.
Maybe let's see in 5 years' time on a follow-up podcast. Let's see. I know. So Tracy, do we have time for your story, or do we have to jump into what we do?
We do not have time.
Okay, we'll have to jump straight into what would you do?
All right. What would you do? Yeah, we got a bit carried away with that one, didn't we? Okay. So what would you do? I got my lovely singing voice. So this, what would you do? We like workplaces. This would be a workplace scenario. So this is the scenario when it's suggested that insert your own minority, Black person, person of color, whatever. Actually, it doesn't even need to be a minority. I can think of it just being expat.
Okay, right. So let's hit me with this circumstance, and then I'll decide.
All right. When it's suggested that a colleague, present at a client meeting. So they're going to present to your clients.
Right.
Someone says, as a concern, she has a strong accent.
Okay. Right. Okay. So this scenario is around someone questioning about the ability or the suitability of a presenter who has an accent. Right. I see. Okay. So it's an interesting one, isn't it? Because in the workplace nowadays, there's so many individuals from differing backgrounds, there's so much and different regions, different countries. And, there's a strong likelihood of a team member that you're working with, who is not from the same, who's not been brought up in the same country and, has an accent. And English may not even be their first language. So, this probably comes up a lot. I doubt it's, well, I don't know whether or not, people question it or not, but if they do, I've never come across that scenario when someone's questioned it. I'd probably ask about, I'd probably say, yeah, it's great. And they've got a great speaking voice too. I'd probably return it around. So I wouldn't go down the path around like questioning, why would that be an issue, that type of thing. But if it did turn into an issue, then I suppose it's about, highlighting the fact that it's good to get somebody on board to present the client meeting. And, regardless on whether or not they've got an accent, as long as they can articulate the message, the content of the work across to the audience, that's all that counts, really.
And I've actually had this experience, kind of a similar one anyway. And I'm thinking about it now. I'm just like, what would I've done differently in that scenario? We've had this, all I will say is that we were having a meeting to train our clients, usually doctors. And so we asked the medic in the company to present clinical data, clinical information. If English was not their first language, this person's English was not their first language. And not only did they have an accent, but their English was not very good. And so this was raised as a concern. And we did move to ask to have somebody else present.
Okay, but that's mainly because it wasn't necessarily their accent, but it was the fact that their English language skills.
Yeah.
And hence going back to that point I made about as long as the message, the content of the work is conveyed successfully. Yeah.
Well, yeah, you made me think about it. It's the fact that they had an accent was part of it, but only made it worse because their English wasn't very good.
I see.
But then also we had people whose English was good, where we also make the request that they didn't present because the way they presented was very monotone, very quiet, just doesn't have the skill to present and be engaging and people to pay attention.
Yeah, and if that's the purpose of the presentation, if that's part of the purpose of the presentation, then you have to consider those attributes when it comes to the selection of the speaker.
Yeah, and in any case, now I would have given feedback that there needs to be some sort of development to help them improve and get to the point where they can present at a level that's required.
Yeah, and that's what a lot of Toastmasters are also available there for. So a lot of people go to Toastmasters, and I've actually been to one in Sydney. And again, my question aside came out because I spent a lot of time asking other people in the group, what led you to come to Toastmasters? And that was one of the main reasons they came, was because there were either opportunities in their workplace of presenting and they weren't confident about this, or they had a presentation due in their workplace and they were not very confident in terms of it was mainly like their style of presenting, nerves around presenting. So that's Toastmasters.
Yeah, so you can upskill that, right? But then also English is my first language, and I know that sometimes people struggle understanding me. I have an accent. I may have an accent.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, a lot of people here in Australia, I know, I shouldn't say a lot of people, but I know people here in Australia where, when it comes to the northern part of England, especially Newcastle, they struggle to understand. And I know, working in the TV industry previously, I know that when there have been programs whereby the content is going to be televised in other countries, English-speaking countries, if there's a Newcastle presenter, there'll be captions and subtitles.
Right. Well, then that might be a solution, honestly. If that's a solution, that's a solution. But I just remember, you just reminded me, I went speed dating once. I went speed dating lots of times, actually. But this particular time was years ago. I went speed dating, and there was lots of different people. The women stayed and the men moved.
Yeah.
And I had a 3-minute conversation with each man. Yeah. And then sat in front of me was a Caucasian Australian man.
Mm-hmm.
And all he said to me was, I can't understand what you're saying.
That's hilarious.
Yeah, that's all he could say to me for the 3 minutes. I don't understand what you're saying.
It's interesting, isn't it? I don't have any struggles, understanding you at all. And even people from Newcastle, I've worked with Ant and Dec. Didn't have any problems understanding them. It's strange how other people, take on accents. Maybe it's because, again, they may not have been exposed to one before.
Well, I just think that's what it is. You have to. The more you hear, the more you understand. It's as simple as that.
It's exposure, and this is another reason why if regardless of whether or not someone, as long as somebody in the workplace has the ability to convey the message of a presentation, then in terms of them having an accent, that shouldn't be a criteria for them not to be selected as a presenter, because it comes down to that exposure. So I know that in an advertising company that I previously worked at, I remember there was a female co-worker of mine, and English wasn't her first language. She moved to Australia about 10 years ago, and she stood up and made presentations. She was heavily accented, and she did a great job. And our group, the audience, they didn't focus on the accent. They were focusing on the content, because what she was presenting was so engaging and so interesting.
But they could understand what she was saying despite the accent.
Yes, it's very heavy. She was very heavy. It was very heavy accent, but that wasn't that wasn't part of the feedback. I didn't interfere with the feedback.
No. So to me, there's two possibilities for this kind of comment. This is just my experience. One is that you actually don't understand what they're saying because you haven't had enough exposure. And the second is you hear the accent and you assume that you won't understand them. There's two different kind of responses there, and I don't know which one this is. So I guess what it would be a case of is, I don't know what the suggestion is yet because I haven't read it, but if somebody said to, she has a strong accent, and my question would be, okay, they have a strong accent. Maybe they have a strong accent. That's subjective, really, right? Can you understand what they're saying, though? Yes or no? Like, can you understand what the message they're trying to convey?
That's exactly it.
Yeah. And if they say no, then
it's worthwhile reconsidering the selection process.
Well, it depends, because again, I'd be like, is it them, or is it how many people does it impact? Do you understand, like, whoever's in the room? Like, I want to generally know, because
so it'd be worthwhile putting it out there to the group. So
because they're going to do one or two things. If it's a minority of people, I'm thinking they specifically haven't had enough exposure, and I'll go with the majority. But then if it's the majority of people thinking, we can't really understand, they're going to help that person get better.
But that's an interesting one, because if the speaker with the accent understands the content, but it's literally about the fact that they have a very heavy accent, and the majority of the team have difficulty comprehending their words because of the accent, then is it a case of, and how would you approach that? With that?
Well, this is the thing. You have to help that person improve their speaking, their English. There'll be an action plan there, but also
that's on the accent. It's like saying to someone, can you improve on your accent?
No, I mean, it's not about the accent. It's, can you understand the words they're saying? Yes or no? And even if you help them improve, Yeah, I've got less of an accent. You want to hear me when I'm back in Blackburn?
I'd love to do that.
I've got less of an accent speaking outside of there because I know people understand me better.
Right.
And if you learn it, it's not even conscious. Ask anybody who's been told that nobody understands them. Their accent has changed, just being better understood. That happens naturally, and it happens naturally with practice. So that's how I would help that person, right? But then we're in the day of technology. I went to a conference the other week, and every speaker on the stage spoke English very well, even if it was the second language. There was people from all over Europe speaking English, except for one woman. And where was she from? I think she was from Brazil, and she spoke in her native language, and sat next to her was an interpreter translating everything she said. Right. So there was two things. One, she had a translator. She's still the expert speaking because she's the expert, but she had a translator. That's not necessarily practical in everyday workplace. Got it. The second thing they had was AI transcribing as live.
Yeah, I like that option whereby there's
captions.
There'd be captions added, especially if it's a presentation you're mentioning. Okay, it's quite a presentation. If there's a presentation that is slides, I like the idea of there being captions,
and even in a Zoom meeting,
as opposed to not selecting that person.
Yeah, exactly. So you do as much as you can to select that person because it gives them exposure, right?
Yeah, and also having captions there, I suppose it's like, it's a company initiative, and it's the company, we're supporting our employees who may not have English as a first language, or who have struggles or difficulties in terms of, or obstacles in terms of presenting.
Well, it's being more inclusive. It's having a more diverse.
Yeah, that's it.
Thing. Yeah, it's all of those things.
So I think I like that idea. I really like that idea, actually. And I think if I was in the audience of a company, let's say if there's a lunch and learn, for example, and I rocked up and I saw this and there's captions, that's what would run through my mind, thinking that's great that they've accommodated this for people who may not understand my co-worker.
Yeah, and you can do captions in Zoom now. You can actually turn it on. So that in a meeting, when people
speak, I love that. Oh, I didn't know that, actually.
I do it in Zoom. Yeah, you can. I mean, it's not the best, as in it's not perfect, but the technology's there and it's getting better all the time.
Yeah, and it's really great because let's say, for example, when you have town halls in this, 1,500 employee strong company, you don't know whether or not, and the leadership team may not know if there's people of with hearing difficulties, for example. And so turning on the caption to make the town hall more inclusive, that's something maybe companies and employers should consider, actually.
Yeah, we just thought of a new initiative.
Yeah, it's actually quite good.
Yeah, that's a good, they should do it anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, okay. What it says.
Yeah, that's it. What do the experts say? Right.
Why it matters. This comment could torpedo your co-worker's chance to present at a meeting, which would be a major missed opportunity for her to prove her skills and show her value to the company. And this is how bias against people with accents can harm people. It can mean that people miss out on assignments, jobs, and promotions for which they are qualified. Okay. And it says you could say that you don't have any trouble understanding her. If that's true, this is what I mean. You don't have any trouble understanding her. You think she'd do a great job at the meeting. You could also ask whether there's a problem with her expertise on the subject matter. If she knows the topic well, her accent shouldn't make a difference. Yeah. And then why it happens. Many people unconsciously assume an accent means a person has poor language skills. That's what I mean. There's an assumption that you understand them just because you hear the accent. Even if their grammar and word choice are perfectly correct. The bias particularly hurts, and it says Latinas here, but it's talking about America.
Yeah.
I would say it hurts Black people, Asian people from, with accents here. And people tend to perceive women with accents as less intelligent and knowledgeable than other women. And it means Latina women. Your colleague may also be hearing an accent where there isn't one. Research shows that people can falsely perceive an accent when a person of color speaks completely unaccented American English. Do you know what that reminds me of? When we had Frankie on, and she's talking about her husband. Like, she's got the accent. He was born in Australia, but he's Asian descent, so he looks Asian. And people are asking him where he's from.
Yeah.
Even though you hear her speak a foreign accent, with a foreign accent, and him speak with a native accent.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's quite interesting.
And can we also be assigning like a judgment or a discrimination when it comes to someone's accent? It can be kind of also reversed in the sense that I had an experience when I first arrived in Australia. This was back in, I think, 2002, and I went for a job interview, and I had arrived slightly late, and they already were interviewers. She already had my CV, and she was reading through it. And when I walked into the room, I sat down, and the first thing I did was I apologized for being late. And her response was, the interviewer's response was, "Oh, you have a British accent. Oh, I wouldn't be able to tell. You wouldn't be able to tell." And that was actually seen in my favor. So what she was expecting,
I know, but that's still a bias. It's discrimination.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. That's what I'm saying, is that it's like my accent somehow it was seen as a plus in her eyes.
Yeah, because they assume people can't.
Because the assumption was, because because I had an Indian surname, or have an Indian surname, because I have an Indian name, and because when I walk through a door I look Indian, the interviewer was not expecting a different accent. So she was expecting an Indian accent. And when I spoke with my British accent, which is what I have, somehow that was seen more as highly regarded.
I honestly think people should keep those thoughts to themselves, because I don't think they realize how it makes them look.
And it was quite shocking at the time. So it was about 20 years ago that happened.
Yeah, I've had people being surprised the other way. Like, it's weird. Like, just say I've met a new friend. Well, this is an exact example. Met a new friend, and we become really close, and she invites me to a family event. Now, she's been talking about her friend Tracy for lots of times with her family, and she's asked, "Can I bring Tracy to our party or our whatever dinner, whatever?" Tracy turns up, and they look at me like, "Oh, I wasn't expecting." Honestly, I've had that. Hi, Tracy. Wasn't expecting to be a black girl. We weren't expecting Tracy to be black. They were surprised.
Wow. Okay. And so when you've been in a situation where you rocked up to a friend's family?
I've been in a situation a couple of times.
And the family,
surprise, not in a horrible way, just surprised.
Yeah. And do they tell you, "Oh, we're surprised"?
Well, I asked later, wow, they just made an assumption. They just thought you were white. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. Older generation. Tracy as a name assigned to white people in their heads, obviously.
Yeah.
It's a bias. It's just a bias.
It's like when you get a story, and I'm noticing this in the books that I'm reading now, is that when you and I hadn't really thought about it before until now, because it's so before, when books are in general, if books are talking about a couple in a certain sense, so it's normally written as a couple, and then I automatically think a heterosexual couple. But now the last few books that I've read have actually referred to a couple, and then later down the track in the story, it actually ends up being a gay couple. But the actual sexuality is not anything to do with the plot line.
Yeah.
But isn't it interesting how your mind sometimes automatically goes to a couple, yes. It's a heterosexual couple. But now the books that I'm reading, the authors are starting to write in write in gay and lesbian couples, married couples. But it's not part of the story, it's not part of the plot line. So it's normalizing things.
And I think it's great. And you gave a really good example, because what I wanted to finish on saying is we all have bias, all of us. I do, you do. And what's really cool is being able to realize that sometimes and point it out. And it's not a judgment, it's not a blame thing, it's just pointed out. And what impact does that have when you realize that bias is there? What could that mean for other people? Does it bring them up? Does it empower them? Or could it, inhibit them or limit them in some ways? So it's not a judgment, it's just a fact of life. This is the world we live in. It's about recognizing that and doing the best we can to help everyone. Right.
Yeah, well said. It's a great point to end on.
So thank you, Bev.
Great.
I love having these heated, controversial discussions with you.
Well, you know, I like to put the cat amongst the pigeons.
Yes. Oh, I don't know if you do like that, actually. Interesting choice of words.
That's true. That is true. Yes.
Yeah.
All right.
Choice of words. All right.
All right. I'll see you next time.
See you next time.
All right. See you. Bye.
Bye.